appointing someone like Bobby Kennedy Jr., who has said with no lack of certainty, there is no safe and effective vaccine, would set public health back 100 years.
Welcome to The Stakes. I'm Brad Rourke with the Charles F. Kettering Foundation. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan operating foundation that focuses on advancing and defending inclusive democracy. Today, I'm speaking with a bipartisan pair of Kettering Fellows who are both former governors and former cabinet officials, former HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius and former EPA Administrator Todd Whitman. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us, Brad.
It's a pleasure.
President-elect Donald J. Trump's cabinet nominations have come rapidly and they have been controversial. We'll start with climate skeptic and deregulator Lee Zeldin, a New York congressman who was nominated on November 11 to be EPA Administrator. Todd Whitman, that is the position you held under George W. Bush. What do you make of this pick?
That's sad for the agency. I mean, it's just sending the signal that they're going to be treated the way they were treated under the first Trump administration, which means they're going to be starved for dollars. My big concern is that they'll probably try to move the headquarters to Kansas, and that's going to be the end of the agency. He's not the worst of the choices that the president's been making because he has done some good things on the environment. He did some good things, but he clearly is a climate denier. And if people haven't seen what's been going on with the climate with their own eyes and feeling it in their own homes and communities, I don't know what it's going to take to get people to understand that we need to be serious about this issue.
On November 14th, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was named as President-elect Trump's pick to run the Health and Human Services Agency. He, too, is a skeptic about his own agency's mission. Strong skepticism, maybe denial about the safety and efficacy of vaccines, for starters. Kathleen Sebelius, you were HHS Secretary under Barack Obama. Tell me about your reaction to the RFK Jr. pick.
Well, Brad, I find it actually terrifying. I think that the position of HHS Secretary, among other things, is a spokesperson for health, not only in the country, but world. We have been a leader in global health issues. No question, one of the most amazing scientific breakthroughs of the last 100 years is effective vaccines, where we were able to eradicate polio in this country and across the globe, where measles is no longer a disease that was impacting children and adults, on and on. And in fact, the one major accomplishment in the health area of the Trump administration was Operation Warp Speed, the incredible public-private partnership which stood up a safe and effective COVID vaccine in record time and was able to manufacture and distribute that across the globe. Appointing someone, nominating someone like Bobby Kennedy Jr., who has said with no lack of certainty, there is no safe and effective vaccine, would set public health back 100 years and add to the growing skepticism of vaccine deniers. He states with certainty that there's a connection between vaccines and autism, absolutely disproven. He states that their vaccines can cause all sorts of irregularity in children. That is just absolutely not true. So just in that one area, I think he could have a life or death impact on not only children and infants in this country, but certainly around the world. And that's really a terrifying place to be.
You don't want somebody with a political agenda who has no background in science telling you what's safe to breathe, what's safe to drink, to consume. You don't want that. You want someone who respects the science that says this is safe, this isn't safe. We don't want children drinking lead in their pipes. We don't want to do away with our regulations that protect us, protect human health and the environment. They're there for our good. And you don't want partisan political people making decisions because they feel that's what a good conservative Republican would do, or that's what Donald Trump wants them to do. They have got to listen to the people who know what they're talking about.
And Brad, I think it's interesting that you have both of us together because there is a lot of crossover between what's happening in the environment and the health of people. Chrissy talked about the air you breathe and the water we drink. That's under the umbrella of EPA, but it's very critical to the health consequences of Americans. Certainly, to have someone who debates science, has his own set of crackpot experts, and is able to use the bully pulpit of the Department of Health and Human Services to say things like people should make their own vaccine decisions, in all due deference to the people I know, even in my neighborhood. They would like somebody with more expertise than they do to give them definitive information. Public health is a lot about trusting the experts, following advice, agreeing to things like herd immunization. So you have at least 95% of a population immunized, and then that provides some protection to others. I take this very personally because I have an 11-month-old grandson. He's too young to get a measles vaccine. He's going to need 3 of them, but that won't be completed for at least another 8 months. He is very susceptible to a measles outbreak, and we have a decreasing vaccination rate already in this country. We have broader and broader exemptions that parents are being given for non-medical reasons, but allowed to send their children to school or to daycare without vaccinations. That actually threatens lives. That's not just about you believe this and I believe that. Saying make up your own mind about vaccination is a very dangerous path to go down, because people don't have the capacity to do their own data research. They are not capable often of saying, well, this theory has been disputed and this one stands up. We rely on experts. And I think Christy and I, one Republican and one Democrat, both come out of the theory of government, that government does public good. This new group seems to believe that government does no good. And the faster they can get rid of the expertise, the faster they can walk in and dismantle agencies, the better off American people are going to be. And I think, again, that's a very dangerous place to start a conversation.
Can I just add to what Kathleen has been saying? When we lived in England, the National Health Service there had stopped vaccinating children for whooping cough. They'd done it a couple of years before. Our daughter was born, and they were in the middle of an epidemic of whooping cough. I had a huge argument with my doctor, who kept saying, well, she'll have brain damage if you give her the vaccine. And I finally said, look, she's got to have it to go to school in the United States. So she'd had one shot of the 2 that she had to have, and she got whooping cough. And I want to tell you, if you've never held a child in your arms who is coughing so badly that they start to projectile vomit, I mean, that's a scary thing. There were children in the hospital. There were children dying from that. And that's because they'd stopped doing the vaccine because they'd had some bad outcomes. And the same thing will happen when we walk away from putting some restriction on what companies can put into the air, what they can dump into the rivers, when we say, oh yeah, fine, catch the fish and eat them. These things have got to be monitored. They've got to be watched, because they will have a real impact on human health.
I'm old enough. I think Christy is younger than I am, but I'm old enough to have
I don't think so.
in kindergarten and take the sugar cube for polio. And at that point, people were dying in the United States from polio.
Right.
My best friend ended up in an iron lung for the rest of her life. So a real disease that a lot of people younger than I am have forgotten all about, but it was terrifying. I also clearly remember, I grew up in Ohio, and it was often regarded as a bit of a joke, but it was no joke for the people who lived outside of Cleveland. The Cuyahoga River often caught on fire, given the amount of chemical waste that was dumped into that river. My father was governor and helped to set up the first environmental protection agency in Ohio. And their first act was to clean up the Cuyahoga River. So these have real consequences.
Thinking further about what might happen on the environment, how quickly can progress be dismantled if you run the EPA?
Pretty quickly. I mean, first of all, they'll stop any regulations that are starting to go forward that have been publicized. They'll stop all of those. And then they'll go back it's a matter of enforcement. What they'll do is stop enforcing. They'll starve the agency for money. They'll start to disregard the science as they did in the first Trump administration, just not pay any attention to the scientists, which means we'll lose a lot of the institutional knowledge because EPA has the longest serving public servants in the government. They stay there. That's their career. They're passionate about protecting human health and the environment. And they see it as a very simple but important and impactful job that they have to do. But they'll start to leave because they'll look for something else, somewhere where their work will be respected.
Thinking about HHS, I'd like to go back to you, Secretary Sebelius, and ask, we've talked about vaccines and the danger that denialism around vaccines presents to the population, very real danger. What are the other areas of concern for this potential nominee?
Well, I think there are lots of areas of concern. It's hard to identify just one. Every time I hear a statement made by the nominee, I am shocked how little he understands about government. And I think part of the job of any secretary is a management job. I found, and Governor Whitman is likely the same, that being a governor is actually great training to be a cabinet secretary. You know, this isn't the private sector where you hire and fire people at will, where you give people bonuses if they do certain things. This is really about hearts and minds and moving a mission forward because people actually trust you, believe in you, want to be part of the effort. Many of these cabinet secretaries, and certainly Bobby Kennedy as a leader of the group, starts out with a huge hostility to the people he is going to manage and lead, talks about blanket firing people, clearly has his mind made up on all kinds of things. When somebody comes in and says, you know, it doesn't really matter what they know, I don't believe them, they're lying to you, I'm going to fire a bunch of them, they'll walk in day one and 600 of them will not walk out the door. I mean, that's a pretty difficult way for any leader. I mean, think of a corporation that chooses a new CEO who makes an announcement before he or she even gets into the CEO seat that they intend to, you know, close down half the shops and fire half the employees. That is not a welcoming notion for the people who are there.
For leaders in power who are concerned with these nominees, what are the avenues of pushback that are available to them?
Get in contact with their senators who are on the relevant committees where the hearings will be held, depending on the department or agency, and push back. Ask the tough questions and push back. I mean, it's going to be, I worry that the Republicans, even those who know better, are going to let some of these go through. You always have to have deference for the incoming president. Your job is to advise and consent, but take that really seriously. Take a deep dive on these people. And if you find they're just unqualified or they're going to do a huge amount of damage, have the courage to stand up and say, no, this person cannot go through.
I think the opportunity for scientists and others to speak out, respected voices, members of the clergy, others to just say, you know, talking both in climate and in health and human services, these are life and death issues. This is not a difference in philosophy. It's not you are more conservative than I am. You are, you know, we have a different point of view. These are really about, will the health, well-being, security of Americans be enhanced or be put in jeopardy if this person is confirmed? And I think it's that kind of lens that has to be used to really question whether there's competence, whether there's, you know, capability, and whether or not at the end of the day, these people really are threatening to the health security, the environmental security, the future of this country. And I think in both the cases, both to have a competent, capable, scientifically based science advisor at EPA and to have someone who really wants to advance health, not just in the United States, but around the globe at Human Services is really essential.
Former Governor and EPA Administrator Christine Todd Whitman, former Governor and HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius. Kettering is proud to count you both as fellows. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Brad.